this second week? Thank you, Sophia. I want to note that on the landing page, I've asked a few of you as you were logging on if the landing page is working, and it looks like it's working great for everyone. I want to note that Bethlehem Center added the mission statements of all of our organizations. So if you want to learn more about them, they are on the on that landing page where you're finding your poetry. Last week, Jay put all of his prompts in the chat. Those prompts are still there from last week. It's a continuous chat because it's one meeting. And I've now put my prompts for the poems this week in the chat. So as we're talking, you can follow along with those prompts. Jay and Sophia and Kathleen, is there anything that you want to add before we dig into these poems?
I'm looking forward to the poems. I've read them in advance, but I can't wait to hear what people have to say.
Me too. Very excited about these poems. Yes.
I'm happy for you to start. I have not read them, but I really am looking forward to closing my eyes and hearing them from you as a surprise. So yes, please go ahead.
I love the idea of these poems being a surprise, Sophia. Well, I want to back up just a minute and remind us what we're doing here. This is called Poetry for the Journey. And one of the ways that I envision this class is almost like we're packing a backpack to be out in the journey of life. And what do you put in a backpack? You put nourishment and water, and you put tools. And so my hope is that when we're done with these 6 weeks, you'll have just 1 or 2 new tools to use out there in the world that is beautiful and the world that is challenging sometimes. And we don't often get tools. We get lots of news stories that can be challenging to us. And so we want to offer you something different and get some tools from you in the ways that you see the poems. Jay, correct me if you have a different point of view, but I feel like the thread from last week, just to recall what we've already done, for me, the thread was presence, being fully present as a tool. We talked about collecting scraps of light as an antidote to the other things that we encounter in the world. We talked about not letting busyness claim us and welcoming the stranger and being present to the stranger in our midst. We talked about the things that people with Alzheimer's know and how to be present, maybe, and learn a tool or 2 from them about presence. And we talked about softening the places in us that are right so that new things can grow. And that also feels like presence to me. Jay, would you pick a different thread than that?
That's an excellent summary of the take-home points from last time.
Good, thank you. Well, this week, just to kind of prep our brains to listen in a certain way, the tool that I see running through these poems, and we may discover other ones and different ones. I can't wait to see what you have to say. But one of the threads for me is to see love and to figure out a new tool of how to love ourselves and how to love creation. And then the other tool would be how to pray, whatever that means to you. But prayer maybe as an openness or an awareness. And so as we go through these, I'd like you to just think about what tools you're going to put in your backpack. So we'll get started with the first poem. I want to show you a picture of, wait a minute, sorry. Oh, sorry, Sophia, you were doing your job. Thank you. I wanted to show you a picture of Czeslaw Milosz real quick. Just because that face is so fantastic. And he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1980. He was born in Lithuania, and his parents escaped from Poland due to oppressive regime. And so he lived, I think it was mostly in California from 1960 until he died in 2004. So, Sophia, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm going to read this through, and I love Sophia's idea of closing your eyes and listening. That's a great way to listen to poetry. Love means to learn to look at yourself the way one looks at distant things, for you are only one thing among many. And whoever sees that way heals his heart without knowing it from various ills. A bird and a tree say to him, friend. Then he wants to use himself and things so that they stand in the glow of ripeness. It doesn't matter whether he knows what he serves. Who serves best doesn't always understand. I want to read it a second time, and I hope Milosz will forgive me for this, but as we move forward in our culture, reverting back to the masculine pronoun as the default, he may have chosen this very specifically because he was a man, but I like to sometimes put the feminine pronoun in there and just see if it hits you in any way. I beg his forgiveness for messing with his poem, but I just want to see how it feels. Love means to learn to look at yourself the way one looks at distant things, for you are only one thing among many. And whoever sees that way heals her heart without knowing it from various ills. A bird and a tree say to her, friend. Then she wants to use herself and things so that they stand in the glow of ripeness. It doesn't matter whether he knows what he serves. Who serves best doesn't always understand what she serves. I messed it up. Thank you, Sophia. We can go back to the gallery view. So my prompt questions are this. What does it mean for a bird or a tree to call you friend? How is that a tool for the journey? What does it mean to use ourselves in creation so that we stand in the glow of ripeness? And this is my favorite part of this poem. This is my favorite poem of all time. How does this relate to the golden rule that many traditions have? We often say, love your neighbor as yourself, but we don't often talk about the tool of how to love ourselves. And I think hearing a bird or a tree call me a friend is one way in to getting to know how to love myself. And that's why I love this poem so much. So I just want to open the conversation up to you to see if any line or image jumped out at you, or if you want to respond to any of these prompts or something else that came up as we were reading it. And Sophia, if you'll take us to full gallery view, then we can see everyone. Would anybody like to go first? Jules.
Hey, everybody. I just want to say thank you for changing the pronoun on that, because hearing it as a feminine really was like, whoa, so powerful. And the connection to self-love, especially for thinking as a female and the feminine energy within that was like just so powerful. There's so many times where as women, we give our love as nurturers out, and not necessarily inward. So just hearing it that way was really powerful. So just wanted to make sure I didn't believe without saying that.
Thank you, Jules. It's powerful for me too, so I'm glad that it hit you that way. Nita.
Yeah, I have been working part-time back in Fort Worth after retiring for some years, helping with some congregational care. And I'm back now at my beautiful lakeside home. And this morning when I walked out on my early morning walk, I have a pair of owl friends who I've named Franklin and Eleanor. And Franklin was there and he had volumes to tell me about because I'd been missing for a while. And I thought his monologue was incredible. And I got so many messages from it. So I have no problem embracing the idea that love comes to us in surprising and unexpected ways. And for me, particularly from birds and animals.
I love that. They were saying, oh, there's our friend, Nita.
Yeah.
She's here. She came back. I love thinking about Franklin and Eleanor. That's great.
I've even named their children after the Roosevelt children, Elliot, when and so forth.
So you are a true friend of the family. That's
I am.
Christine.
Yeah, I think what came to me was the feeling of belonging. And the feeling of belonging, you're going to heal, you're a part of this. That was it. Yeah, just a real feeling of belonging, which really does heal us and we don't even realize.
I love that you picked up the don't even realize part, right? Creation can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Anybody else had a thought or two about this poem? Leo.
Yeah, I was at a webinar with Humanity Rising. Tom Eddington offered an analogy that we are both particle and wave. We are both self and community. And the line in the poem that echoed that was, "For you are only one thing among many." So rather than seeing ourselves as things, we're a way. We participate in this wider community that includes birds and trees.
That's beautiful to note, the particle and wave, the two different forms that we can take. We can both be a thing and we can both be in unity with all the other things. That's really lovely. Thank you for amplifying that line. Dan.
Thank you. I like to think of love as a force rather than a feeling. It's the divine force that unites us and binds us together with all things in creation. I also like to think of love as attraction to the divine. That's where the force, and we see the divine in all of creation. And so all things are our friends because we all reflect the divine in one way or another. And
that's beautiful.
I appreciate you putting the poem in the feminine voice, because it reminds me that we can distinguish between male and female on the one hand and masculine and feminine on the other hand, because God is both masculine and feminine. It's not gender, it's aspect. And so if we want to be whole, well-rounded human beings, both men and women seek to find the masculine and feminine within themselves.
That's right. I was just having a conversation yesterday about how important it is, not just for women, but for men to embrace the divine feminine, and how important it is for men and women both to embrace the divine masculine. So I like that you made that differentiation. That's good. We both carry both inside of us. Thank you. Jay, on that point that force is, that love is a force, is there anything in process theology that talks in similar language?
In process theology, energy and feeling are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we call energy at the molecular atomic level, that's actually a form of feeling in process thought.
Oh.
Which means that our feeling is also a form of energy. And God is both energy and feeling.
That's beautiful.
I don't know if that's true, but I think it's interesting.
There's something true about it, whether it's factual or not, who knows? Kind of to wrap this up, the other thing that jumped out at me, I'm reading, so I'm an Episcopal priest, but I'm also reading a book that our friend Dr. Ali Khan gave me about Muhammad's early years. And so Jesus has a line that says, if this temple is thrown down, then the stones will shout my name, something like that. I'm not quoting it perfectly, but that the stones would cry out if he couldn't. And then when I was reading about the Prophet Muhammad, it said when he went off to meditate in the wilderness, sometimes when he would be walking out, the stones and the trees felt like they were talking to him. Sophia, have you heard this before?
Yes, absolutely. Heard this and totally like to believe that it's true for me at least. Yes, the stones and the trees and the clouds and the flowers talking to him. And I hope that some of us also have those experiences when we feel that the nature is just talking to us. It does happen. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm glad I wasn't totally wrong on that one. And so that would be a very a story that says trees and stones really will say that you're friend, and especially owls named Eleanor and Franklin. All right, before we move on to the next poem, yes, Sophia.
Patricia, we have a few comments. Would you like to read them, or especially the one by Carol, because she put her thoughts about the poem there?
Could you read those for us, Sophia? Do you mind?
Sure. So Alice said, thank you for the feminine. It immediately grabbed me, and I could identify with the female way of seeing the images in the poem. Carol earlier said that she's not able to talk because she's in a car, but she sent her thoughts about the lovely poem. So the first one is opening self to a vaster relationship. Second thought by Carol is being available for the presence to reach us in the form of other living beings, which is beautiful. And third is decentralizing self, knowing that we are one among many crested beings. And the fourth thought that Carol put is serving as being present to the presence. So just wanted to make sure we include her in our discussion.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Sophia. And one more comment from Julie before we move to the next poem.
Hi, thank you. I really relate to that idea of the bird calling me friend. And I was walking on the river near my house recently, and a poem came to me. So would it be okay if I read it?
Of course.
Okay. So this is my words. So, the river, such a good friend, always moving, a trickle, a roar, white water, twinkling in the sunlight, still water behind the rocks, an eddy, a rest place for ducks and paddlers. Movement, light, stillness, all the things we need. The river, my teacher, such a good friend.
Thank you. I love that you happen to choose the word friend, that the river is your friend, and then to add on, and you're also the river's friend is amplification. Thank you for being brave and willing to share your poetry. That is wonderful. What a good place to end that poem. So let's move on to Eagle Poem by Joy Harjo. Joy Harjo was our U.S. Poet Laureate in 2019, and she was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and is a member of the Muskogee or the Creek Nation. So she speaks from a point of view of really being concerned about language, and the language of the First Nations of our country disappearing, and how we use language is really important to her. So here we go. Get settled and take a deep breath, and let's let this wash over us. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know, except in moments steadily growing, and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky and wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this. And breathe knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle rounding out the morning inside us, we pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Thank you, Sophia. We can close out the poem. Excellent. So, this is my second favorite poem of all time. It's so fun to get to teach a class on poetry and that I've held these poems with me for like 30 years, and it's so fun to share them. So my prompts for this one are: how is prayer an opening? What is the whole voice that is in us? How can languages be circles of motion? Does this have anything to do with loving yourself? And is the glow of ripeness in Milosz's poem the same thing as taking the utmost kindness in all things in this poem? So you can either talk about that or one or two of the lines that really jumped out at you as being something that might be a tool for your journey. Who would like to go first? Kathleen, yes, let's hear from a poet.
Well, this probably relates to all the questions and the prompts you had, but one of the things that really struck me was the line about we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a circle of motion, like an eagle rounding out the morning inside us. I was so struck by it. She was looking out at the world, thinking about language. Language, which is always trying to describe this physical world, our relationship with the world. And then it's trying to do it because this physical world of motion and everything we see is something we want to try to express. But what's really magical for me in this poem is that this starts to move inside of her. Mm-hmm. It's looking out and feeling these things, and then it's taking it inside. And that's part of the breathing.
Kathleen, I'm so glad that you noted that she talks about the exterior experience of the eagle and then trying to put that in language as a circle of motion and then living inside as a circle of motion. That is, yeah, that's all this kind of spiraling down into her. That's really beautiful. Thank you for pointing that out. Do you feel like that's true in some way for you, Kathleen, that this motion brings you? What about that circle of motion is true for you?
Well, I think it's going on all the time inside of us. We don't always talk about it. And I know for me, it's true with writing and it's true spiritually. I think there are times when we're a little bit more porous, a little bit more open, which goes back to the poem, the first poem you were talking about. Yeah. There's times that we permit it a little bit more.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else would like to share how this poem struck you? Jay, and then Mary Elizabeth.
Yeah, Mary Elizabeth, you go first, please.
Sorry, I will, since mine builds on Kathleen's and it's brief. The poem communicates. I love the way the poem opens and the way then later in the poem it communicates about breathing. Breathing itself is prayer in this poem. And the lines that really struck me are: breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born, and die soon within a true circle of motion. That sense of breathing and praying and being is very powerful.
Thank you. And that breathing is I mean, we call it circulation, circulating air through us. So it's a circle of in and out that can become a prayer, which I learned from Jay McDaniel in Buddhist sitting meditation, that you count your breaths as a prayer. So Jay, what are you thinking about?
One thing I'm thinking about is the relationship between inside and outside. And whether when is that a helpful way to think? There are things inside me and there are things outside me. And when is that not a helpful way to think? That the very line between inside and outside is in some way not real. And Kathleen's notion of the eagle outside us is also swirling inside us. That's very process theology, because in process theology, the many of the world become one in us at every moment. There's even a name for that. They call it concrescence. The whole many of the world concress in us. But that means that we ourselves are not just one. We are many. So we are the eagle. Not to reduce the eagle to our projections, but there would be no us without that eagle. So that's what comes to my mind. Also, I really appreciate the word beauty. Any poem that uses the word beauty and uses it twice with uppercase B, you got me.
Oh, I love that. I love the thought of the difference between exterior and interior being necessary sometimes, but also not real. And breath is the perfect example of that. You breathe in what's outside and make it inside. You breathe it out what's inside and make it outside. So that is the crux of this, I think. And the concrescence is similar from Milosz's poem of I'm one thing among many. I think that thread's in there too. Is that correct, Jay?
Yes, it's a little different though, because they're both true, but I am one among many. That's true. But it's also true that the many of the world are in me. That's true too. So the part is a part of a larger whole. That's true. But also the whole is in each part. That's true too.
Thank you. That's a very good differentiation there.
Would that be like intersecting circles, where the common area, is where the circles intersect?
Yeah. William Blake has the metaphor of seeing the universe in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower. And in process thought, the universe is in every moment. So the moment contains the universe. It's not that they overlap exactly. It's that the many is in the one.
Okay.
A little different.
And I'll just amplify that is this moment. Often in the Episcopal faith, we talk about the welcoming of the kingdom of God, or that we are in eternity right now. This isn't something theoretical. What we are doing right now is also what Jay is describing. So, all right, are we ready to move on to Rainer Maria Rilke's next poem? Rilke was born in Prague, which is now in the Czech Republic, in 1875, and he died in 1926 in Switzerland, and he wrote in German and in French. For some reason, and Sophia, tell me if this, after I read it to you, after I read the surprise poem to you, this feels somewhat like Hafiz or Rumi to me, in the fact that Rilke seems to take the notion of the divine and bring it down into the present moment in very particular ways. We'll read this. So the secondary title is Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. So that clues you in, but you can hear this however you want. You come and go. The doors swing closed ever more gently, almost with a shudder. Of all who move through the quiet houses, you are the quietest. We become so accustomed to you, we no longer look up when your shadow falls over the book we are reading and makes it glow. For all things sing you. At times we just hear them more clearly. Often when I imagine you, your wholeness cascades into many shapes. You run like a herd of luminous deer, and I am dark. I am forest. You are a wheel at which I stand, whose dark spokes sometimes catch me up, revolve me nearer to the center. Then all the work I put my hand to widens from turn to turn. I'd like to read it a second time just to make sure we all feel the imagery in that. You come and go, the doors swing closed ever more gently, almost with a shudder. Of all who move through the quiet houses, you are the quietest. We become so accustomed to you, we no longer look up when your shadow falls over the book we are reading and makes it glow. For all things sing you. At times we just hear them more clearly. Often when I imagine you, your wholeness cascades into many shapes. You run like a herd of luminous deer, and I am dark. I am forest. You are a wheel at which I stand, whose dark spokes sometimes catch me up, revolve me nearer to the center. Then all the work I put my hand to widens from turn to turn. Okay, let's talk. The prompts for this one are, to whom is Rilke speaking? Does the glow in this poem connect to the glow of ripeness in our first poem? Do you hear any comparison between the spinning wheel that revolves the poet nearer to the center and those circles of motion we heard in Joy Harjo's poem? And we haven't really hit on these in the other poems. Milosz asks us to, he who serves best doesn't always understand. Harjo asks us to pray that it will all be done in beauty. And this poem talks about all the work that I do, that I put my hand to, widens from that circular motion. So there's a call to action in all three poems that I'm interested in. So what tool from the journey do you get from this poem, or what lines stood out or ideas stood out to you? Who would like to go first? And I'd love to hear from some folks who haven't said anything yet. If you want to jump in there, you're welcome to.
I'll get us started just to get things in motion. But I thought that this poem is so beautiful. And for me, each stanza is a poem in its own right. But on the first stanza, I actually thought of my wife. And living in a home with another person, and how they can come up in and out of a room, and you can be busy and they're kind of in the periphery of your consciousness. But when you think about it, they're really so beautiful. And you forget that in that moment, in our moments of. And so I thought and there's a quietness. That was a very loving stanza too. There was a quietness in its appreciation as well as in the person walking through the room. So that's what I thought. And then I realized, oh no, Jay, you're supposed to be thinking of God. And so I couldn't decide. I couldn't decide. Was it my wife or was it God? I'm not sure.
I think we're deciding that there may be some overlap, or she is inside of it and also is it.
Yeah.
Well, I love that, bringing it down to the people we live with, we often take them for granted in the same way that we take the divine, and there doesn't have to be a division there, right? They can be one and the same. So we've got comments from Christine and then Jules.
Yeah, am I unmuted?
You're great.
Okay, thank you. Two things I thought. Well, the one thing that I thought of is, during a week of prayer or praying a lot about something, God comes in and answers that prayer. And the first couple times he does that, you get so excited. And then you kind of just get used to it. You get used to those prayers being answered and living in that. And then with a real stark contrast, I thought of my little dog, because I can be sitting reading and I all of a sudden look down and she's on my lap. I don't remember her jumping up, or I'll wake up from a nap and she was with me the whole time. Or if I start looking for her and realize she's been following me all along and I didn't know. So it's kind of one of those presents. I haven't had a dog for a long time, and her presence in the house, it's amazing. So anyway, that was just my thought.
Thank you. I love thinking, often we're, at least in the Christian tradition, we're uncomfortable talking about God being these other things, but there is a spark of the divine that is in all of creation. So to think about your dog following you and not being aware of it, and then to superimpose this, whatever your image of the divine is, that they're following you all the time and you may not be aware of it too, is a beautiful thought. Julie's clapping. Jules, what have you got in your brain?
So I wrote down the line, for all things sing you. At times we just hear them more clearly. So that really jumped out to me, because I keep feeling like there's, for me, a theme kind of forming so far with the 3 poems, to where there is, the divine is speaking in all of these different ways to us, but it's still parts of us, so it's like the dark, the light, the wholeness, all of it, right? The kindness that we can hold ourselves in love and beauty, and we can see ourselves in all of these different ways and be reminded that they're always speaking to us. But then for last week, it's like, how busy are we? Are we noticing it? Are we paying attention? Are we noticing the bird calling us friend? If they will call us friend. And so can we call ourselves a friend to ourselves? So within that, it's like, I've just kind of been, that point keeps coming out to me, of that it's us with us, being kind to ourselves, that self-love, like I said in my last comment. So, but yeah, that really stuck out to me, that all things sing you. At times we just hear them more clearly. That was really beautiful.
Thank you, Jules. That is beautiful to say the divine speaks to us, but is also part of us. And sometimes we hear it and sometimes we don't. And there's a certain gentleness that I learned from the Buddhist tradition of how to be gentle with ourselves as we notice these things, and don't beat ourselves up for not hearing it all the time, but just to know that it's there whenever we're ready to pay attention and to hear. Yeah. And sometimes it breaks through and we don't even try, which is also lovely. Jay, don't let me bastardize Buddhism. So if
That's
I say,
okay, you're doing fine. Yeah.
Dan, what you got on your brain?
This last stanza seems to me like it could be a metaphor for prayer and meditation, because it's talking about a force that draws us to the center, which is what we do when we pray. We're drawn to our nearness to God. And then in the quietness of our meditation, we're given insights that expand our understanding and our thoughts, And what does it say? Then all the work I put my hand to widens from turn to turn. So our understanding amplifies the service we're able to render.
I love that you brought the service aspect back up, because I feel like when we are centered in that deep center and we're open, our work becomes something that glows. But when we don't, our work often is fulfilling something else, like our egos or like our desires or our drives, and we become very different people in the world. How would this poem sit with a spiritual independent or an atheist? To whom is this poem then addressed? It could be to a wife, to a dog. Is there anybody in this group that has that point of view that would like to share? I don't want to assume that we all believe in a God. There may not be anybody that has an idea. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So, yes, Julie, and then Kathleen.
Well, I think they might respond to this. All things sing to you at times. We just hear more clearly, but specifically, all things sing to you, and your wholeness. The sacred, it links to Harjo, the sacred wings, and to the sacredness that is in everything. And so maybe it would stir up a questioning or a seeking to that wholeness, that centering, that sacredness that is in the bird and is in the river and to all life. That we're part of that sacredness, and the sacredness, we're part of that wholeness of the sacred.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, that it can be deeply grounded right here where we are in this beautiful creation. And it can be about something bigger than that, or something that is here, and maybe they're the same. So Kathleen, what are you thinking about? And you're on mute.
My thought follows on that too. There are some people for whom they have a sense of the universe, that they're part of a universe. It's maybe non-theistic, but this is the universe speaking to them and being part of it. But I also was thinking from the very beginning, when I first read this, I thought immediately of a poem that Sophia had shared, and I can't remember which one, and I think it was by Hafiz, and I think the spiritual part of the spiritual alphabet it spoke to was imagination, and it was about imagining God. It was a poem in which the poet was imagining God in a very unusual way and kind of encouraging us to do that. And for some reason, the lines in the poem that were most unusual in that regard were in the third stanza. And again, it goes back to the wholeness and then these individual parts. But you run like a herd of luminous deer, and I am dark, I am forest. And that just really grabbed me. And I could think, why is that? Why is that happening? Well, it's the light and dark and all that. But I thought, it's almost like, the deer require the forest, and the forest require the deer. The light and the dark, it's like the Tao, but also whatever God, whatever, we all, everything requires each other.
That's beautiful. Thank you for bringing up the Tao and that symbol of the light in the dark and the dark in the light. That's a good image. Any last thoughts on this before we go to our last poem? Y'all are amazing. And there's Leo put a poem for our consideration in the chat. So if y'all want to check that out later, Leo, if you want to say anything else about that, you are welcome to. All right, go ahead. Yes, Leo, go ahead.
Oh, just that third stanza, I think a process thought with the herd running like a luminous deer, and I am dark, I'm the forest. So I embody that process. I'm observing it, but there's a difference between observing the process and fully participating in it.
That's beautiful. Right. That's right.
Yeah.
It empowers us that we are part of the process and not just observing that. I love that. All right, our last poem. We made it in time to get to the fourth poem. We agreed as leaders that we would do 4, but we might not have time to get to the fourth one. So I'm glad we did. I got to see Lee read in Chicago in the 90s. What a gentle person. He was born in Indonesia in 1957. His parents were powerful Chinese families. His great-grandfather was the first president of the Republic of China, and his father was a personal physician to Mao Zedong. So they fled Indonesia in 1959 and settled in the United States in 1964. So he writes a lot about his family and those relationships, leading him into something more universal. It's called The Hammock. When I lay my head in my mother's lap, I think how day hides stars. The way I lay hidden once, waiting inside my mother's singing to herself. And I remember how she carried me on her back between home and the kindergarten once each morning and once each afternoon. I don't know what my mother's thinking. When my son lays his head in my lap, I wonder, do his father's kisses keep his father's worries from becoming his? And I think, dear God, and remember, there are stars we haven't heard from yet. They have so far to arrive. Amen, I think. And I feel almost comforted. I have no idea what my child is thinking. Between 2 unknowns, I live my life. Between my mother's hopes, older than I am by coming before me, and my child's wishes, older than I am by outliving me. And what is it like? Is it a door and goodbye on either side? A window and eternity on either side? Yes, and a little singing between 2 great rests. Do y'all think I need to read it a second time?
So beautiful.
I'll read it one more time. When I lay my head in my mother's lap, I think how day hides the stars, the way I lay hidden once, waiting inside my mother's singing to herself. And I remember how she carried me on her back between home and the kindergarten once each morning and once each afternoon. I don't know what my mother's thinking. When my son lays his head in my lap, I wonder, do his father's kisses keep his father's worries from becoming his? I think, dear God, and I remember there are stars we haven't heard from yet. They have so far to arrive. Amen, I think, and I feel almost comforted. I have no idea what my child is thinking. Between 2 unknowns, I live my life. Between my mother's hopes, older than I am by becoming before me, my child's wishes, older than I am by outliving me. And what's it like? Is it a door and goodbye on either side? A window and eternity on either side? Yes, and a little singing between 2 great rests. All right. We've got about 8 minutes. Anything jump out at y'all that you really want to talk about? And I'm curious. Oh, go ahead. Tina, go ahead.
Well, at my age, being a parent and a grandparent, and in the last part of my life, it really makes me ponder about what is on the other side. But at the same time, I'm very hopeful about that. There are stars. Let's see, am I in the right poem? The Hammock, yeah. There are stars we haven't heard from yet. They have so far to arrive. And I think and I feel almost comforted. And the fact that we don't know what our child is thinking, and we didn't know when we were younger what our mother's thinking. I don't know. It's just a very interesting time of life, and it's obviously a cycle of life. And it seems to me that a lot of what we've been talking about is circles and cycles. And I found this poem really kind of comforting for the crone age.
Thank you, Tina. And Kathleen, were you going to say something? Okay. Julie.
Like the, oh, wrong, Julie. Go ahead.
Is it my turn? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I really like this poem. I like the, you know, the different generations going on and not knowing what the mother thought, what the child thinks. And for myself in my life right now, I'm a part of 4 generations on both sides of my family. You know, there's grandparents, great grandparents, myself, and then the kids. So there's 4 generations, and I'm finding it's really interesting how with the grandkids, I'm remembering when my kids were small, and that takes me back to a time. And then also with my parents who are my parents who are grandparents and great grandparents, they're starting, you know, the older ones, they are reminiscing about their childhoods. And it's just a very rich 4 generations with lots of people involved. And I find myself thinking about things I haven't thought about in years, and also thinking about what am I going to be like when I'm 90, because I've got 4 elders in their late 80s and early 90s. So actually 5 when I think about an uncle too. So lots of generations going on.
I love hearing all those generations, and that does, and in both your comments, Tina's and Julie's, it does make all of this living and dying feel very circular and very generational, and that it just keeps going, which is lovely. Who else was wanting to talk? Was it another Julie?
I would just, but I like the yes. I asked the questions at the end, as we always ask questions, and he says yes. That's the fullness of thought that we have seen in the other poems.
Yes, I love that too. He asked 2 what appear to be completely different questions, and he says yes to them both.
Yeah.
Jay,
I think this poem introduces a theme that has not yet been introduced, but that is also important. And I don't know what word to use, maybe call it solitude or privacy. I'm really searching for words, but I remember one time reading a poem, and it was written by a wife to her husband. And she said, I love you very much, and you've always been a mystery to me. And she said, you have in you a celibate core. That's the phrase she used. A celibate core, a place that's your own. But I don't know. But I find that beautiful. And so I think, you know, this poem speaks to that side of life. Beautiful. Where we are individuals too. And we do have a personal side, a private side that's known by no one, including ourselves, probably. And I just think that this poem points, among other things, to that. It's an existential side of life. By the way, I think that the religions speak to that Prophet Muhammad speaks to that. And the call of Allah is to each person in his or her solitariness. And sometimes we forget that. So I think this poem brings that up.
thank you. Yeah, he doesn't know what his mom's thinking. He doesn't know what his child's thinking. Yeah. It's lovely. Carol, did you want to say something?
I did, if I can unmute myself. Okay.
You're good. You're unmuted.
The car finally stopped so I can speak. I thought it was an invitation into mystery, whatever you name that. You know, we live inside the unknown. And that's a call to something beyond self. I think Jay's point about solitude, but into that stillness and mystery. Somehow we're beckoned there, whether it's by the images of resting in the lap or being carried and held, and not knowing the thoughts of anyone, not even ourselves, just beckons us, I think, into the mystery.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I had not even connected the images of being held with that invitation. So that's a great, great addition to this conversation. And we have a nice note from Leo that the hyphen between our birth year and our death year on our tombstone is the little singing between the great to rest. And this morning in Humanity Rising, Dr. Richard Grossman shared an anecdote of hearing a friend's young child making a whooshing sound in the backseat of the car, and asked about that sound. He replied, "Oh, it's the sound I heard before I was born." So that's great. Well, I want to respect our time. It's 1 o'clock. Is there any last comment that you just got to get out, or you're going to walk away unsatisfied? Okay, well, I hope that you can walk away from this class with any feeling that you have, but my hope would be that you walk away with some tool, something to put in your backpack for your journey into this day. And maybe it's something about opening and that being your form of prayer. Maybe it's something about loving yourself and hearing all of creation call you a friend. Or maybe it's about how are you going to sing between the two great rests in your life, or not taking for granted the light that is in all of our lives, whether that's a dog or a wife or the divine. And I wish you all well as you go out in your journey. See you next week.